Joe Aurilia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Mateo. Pleasure to be here.
So, Joe, what is your role today? What do you do?
For me, it depends on the day, depends on the hour, but I am officially an SVP of operations for a cybersecurity startup, and that role can be very changeable. One minute you could be fixing something, bringing out your band-aids in your toolbox. The next minute you could be coaching and helping and consoling, and the next minute you could be running into a fire, smiling and waiting to put it out and see what the next big adventure brings.
Very nice. And you're managing how many people today in total?
Today, our team is about 270 globally across 7 different countries.
Wow, very nice. How did you get to where you are today?
It's been a journey. It's funny. The more you actually think about how you got here, the more you talk with others, and it appears we all wind up in the operations position not by choice. You don't go to college or school and say, "Hey, I want to be an operations person." You kind of wind up there through experience and the things you've done. So, began life as a computer scientist, so hardcore developer at heart. Really love the designing and building of systems, being able to see something come to life. You're given a requirement and nothing exists, and you get to see this automation happen right in front of you. Moved on from pure development to enterprise architecture work, migration strategy, disaster recovery, really integrating vast numbers of very old systems together and bringing them into sort of the modern enterprise application stack, which was fun for quite a long time. Moved on from there to get my MBA. I thought it'd be good to kind of mix that into the fold and get some of that more sort of business experience. And I also had a few startups during the time. I had a consulting business, did that for quite a while. Had some other application services and those type of activities. At some point, moved into the renewable energy sector, which doesn't seem to align, right? You go from pure technology, your operations now, you got renewable in the middle. It was a very popular time for the industry, and you really got to see how do you build things from scratch, right? It's not like some other startups where you're fully funded. You have all this, ability to grow. How do you do things on a budget? How do you grow and be resilient? And challenge was we had to try to expand across a large footprint, right, in multiple state territory. And we did it with Salesforce, bringing Salesforce in, architecting an entire solution around that, and really understanding how to make that the center of your business and make that run everything for you to be as optimal as you can be. After that journey was completed, I found this company, which was a great find, a cybersecurity startup. They were just entering into, they had their seed funding, and they were looking for someone to come in and build out the US departments. And we decided to join forces with them. Very exciting opportunity. Coming in to see nothing, right? Just one person here in the US, one of the owners, and you're told you have a blank slate, start from scratch. You have a team other end of the world building some product, doing a phenomenal job, but we'd like you to build these departments and bring them up. So how do you do that? There's nothing to begin with, and that's where the operational journey really is exciting, because you get to create process structure, bring people on, see people mature. Moving from an individual contributor to a manager to a director, and kind of watch that journey unfold in front of you, which is a tremendous amount of pleasure to watch.
Very nice. And when you were building your team, um, what were you looking for when hiring? What do you typically look when you're hiring direct reports?
Hiring is a very challenging subject to this, right? There's a vast amount of different ways people, procure talent and have conversations. Some focus just on the resume, some focus just on, where you came from a company point of view. I focus on, are we going to work well together for X hours a day? Are we going to have great synergy? Are we going to have a ability to communicate well, to share ideas, even when we disagree, which is part of the learning process and part of where innovation happens. So how is that person on the other end of the table going to survive challenges, understand how to figure things out when the path is uncertain or very unclear? And most of my conversations go on trying to see how they fit into that puzzle piece. Can they be a part of the team? Can they solve their own problems? Can they work with others collaboratively in a fully remote, fully global environment? And can they come out the other side with something new that didn't exist beforehand?
Nice. And I assume there's a lot of experience that makes you better at reading people, right? Do you think that you got better over time in doing this the right way, right? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I still remember the first time I was asked to interview someone. I was a much younger person at that point, and I remember a manager came around and said, "You're interviewing this person today." And I'm thinking, well, I mean, I'm deciding this person's life here. How do I know what to do? And they're like, "Oh, just ask good questions." I'm like, "Okay." So I definitely feel I've got in a lot better since then. I think you never get perfect. There's no perfect process, but you become more comfortable with the conversation. You're just sitting down having a chat. Both parties should be not afraid of the conversation. It should be cordial. And you're just kind of trying to see, hey, is this a good match? Not everything is a good match, and that's not necessarily bad. We want it to be good on both sides of the table because they spend a lot of time together. No one wants to be unhappy in what they're going to do X hours a day. So I definitely think the more you do it, the better you get. I've had the fortune, you can say, so to speak, to perform about 500 interviews in a 2-year period, which to me seems a lot for someone who's not officially a recruiter. But you get to learn to understand a lot of patterns and styles through that quantity of consistent conversation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. How do you keep track of all of your different teams? What do you measure?
It's certainly a challenge. We can say we have tools and we use them to the best of our ability, but there's a lot of quantity that we generate these days and a lot of tools that information is in. So very much into, if there's something that needs to be done and delivered, and that delivery is going to take more than a few minutes or a few hours, it's got to be a task somewhere. So what is your project management tool, your task system tool you're going to use? Are you able to do it in a way that you can collaborate with your team and add comments regardless of the time of day or where you are in the status of the project? I'm a huge fan of the sprint methodology as well. So even if you're not purely doing development work, what does your team plan to accomplish in the next week or two? Can we assign work that seems comparable to each team member's skill level and the quantity of time, also take into account the things that you can't always control. So X meetings per week, X conversations, X other things for email, and really trying to hold everyone, both the individual team members as well as the manager of the team, accountable for completing that work effort, and just seeing those small wins gain over time, right? You're not looking to say, hey, let's finish this massive thing and map it out to infinity, but let's chip away at it and see consistent progress to reaching our goals.
Nice. How and when do you define goals and priorities? Do you use like the OKR system or something similar?
I think it's going to depend on the stage of maturity of an entity. To say that you start out of the gate doing OKRs, I think would be people might look a little questionably at that, right? How can you have that level of specificity when you're just beginning and you don't exactly even know what tomorrow morning is going to look like?
Right.
I think setting down goals in general are key at any stage. So what do I want to accomplish today? What do I want to accomplish this week, this month, this quarter? I think multi-year goals get a little fuzzy these days. The world changes too fast. So let's be realistic with our goals. We're all going to have shiny balls we want to follow, right? Things are floating in the air. We love this idea. We love that idea, but we have to focus for the sake of the team and the sake of the mission. So I think refining those goals, gaining buy-in, and having a reason for them is very key. And that is sort of like a no-frills OKR. So you have a goal, but what's the reason of the goal? And what is the result you want from the goal? When do you want it to happen? So I think we're all kind of doing OKRs without putting it always under an OKR umbrella and having sort of the weight of the process. I do think over time, as your team and your company matures, you do get more official. So what is the breakdown of those responsibilities and those goals between different tiers? Can you map one level of goals to another? Can they be tiered all the way from the top all the way to the lower level, so you can have that unison and you have that end result being together? So I do think it's very key, and I think just the way you do it changes over time.
Nice. You are now part of a very large organization, but after you did your MBA, you had a phase where you were an entrepreneur, you had your own business. Do you kind of miss the time of being the head of the entire business and making all the decisions? How does it feel to be back on the operations side, where sometimes you make decisions, sometimes you just take directions?
I think certainly it's a learning in both ways, and something that you have to have a few entrepreneurial sprints at before you kind of get the lesson, right? I think in the beginning, you're very concerned about everything. Everything in the world is a fire. Everything in the world has to be perfect. After a few rounds, you realize perfect isn't exactly best. You need to think about the larger picture. You need to think about how everything works together, and what is the way that makes you have another day to move forward and to achieve something that you didn't have previously. So I think as a top executive, you certainly have to have all that in mind, and I think that your opinion on that changes over time as you do more and more startups and work with more and more people. In the current role, you still have a vast amount of weight on your shoulders, right? You're responsible for essentially the pipes and plumbing sort of within an enterprise, everything from your your IT, your insurance, your procurement, project management, revenue. You have all these different responsibilities, so you still have the same weight, but you need to understand the difference between providing an analysis and making a final decision. Not everything is underneath your control. And I found that relates very similar to, let's say, the legal or the contractual profession. A legal or contractual individual can recommend X, Y, and Z. I recommend you do this to prevent this risk from happening. But you, Mr. Klein, Mr. or Mrs. Klein, you can decide what you want to do. You can pick the path you choose, but I've documented what I'm doing. I think similar that happens at all levels today. You present your best case analysis, you present your pros and cons, you have a professional, mature decision, and then the path that's taken is sometimes what you want and sometimes what others may want, and you have to be able to live with that.
You said something very interesting in that earlier in your career, maybe everything seemed like a fire, and now you kind of know how to differentiate. I've been in operations. I consider it to be a very stressful role. How do you manage stress? How do you prioritize and differentiate between what is a fire and what's not really a fire, and how you manage emotions through all of that?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I would say I think it's an important lesson for everyone once they're able to sort of experience that for themselves. I think you can't let the stress get to you as best as you can. That's certainly easy to say, but stress is not needed. You're going to be in that situation regardless. Let's figure out a way to not make it physically upset, the individual. One way I like, and as simple as it sounds, is in every meeting I have, regardless of the level, I have to make someone laugh. Someone's got to laugh on that phone call. We have to have fun. So there has to be something that brings us together in a non-work fashion. So we realize that it's not all about just getting something done. We're still working together. We're still, a work unit, and we're enjoying something. So I think that's very key. The other part is something that reduces stress is trust. You have to have trust with your team. You hire them for a reason. You're paying individuals, very good salaries, and you want to be able to work together as a unit. So being honest, being clear. If there's a difficult situation, to the best of your ability, share that, bring them into the fold and allow them to work with you to accomplish that goal. Because as much as people, write it down, it's on postcards, it's in there as memos, but you don't accomplish anything alone. You accomplish it together. So how best to do that? And I think that focusing on some of those areas alleviates stress, it reduces particular tensions, and also realizing that there will always be problems to solve. You're never going to get to the stage, whether you're the owner or an operations executive or any executive, where things are perfect. You can never clean the plate and have it empty for a few days. There will always be a new message, a new problem to solve. So you have to just take each one in stride and just see how to best navigate that situation. And the faster you can navigate the situation, and the closer you can be to accuracy over time, I think the better those things tend to work out.
How do you manage time?
I think calendars do rule my life to a vast extent, but I have designed a way to marry together, your personal life and your work life into a calendar to sort of prevent you from going insane, so to speak. So you really have to be able to carve out time where this is work and this is not work. These are meetings, these are not meetings. Putting space in to do things like checking your email, having conversations, following up with key people. You have to protect that time to get that work done while focusing on what needs to be done now versus what needs to be done later. And I think understanding your own working style. Are you better working in little bits of time? Are you better working in larger blocks, a few times a week? Understand what you yourself find gets you accomplished more during a week, using those patterns in your calendaring system. and using technology to help you. There's a phenomenal number of apps out these days that are well vetted, well tested, and they really help you automate a lot of those monotonous tasks, so you can focus on what you do best, which is the actual that work product, and let something else manage some of those blocks for you. So I think marrying the technology with understanding yourself and how you work best allows you to keep a hold of your schedule, and you be the boss of your schedule, not your schedule be the boss of you.
When or where did you learn this? Was this something that, right out of school, you knew how to do? Did you learn it over time?
I think you learn it over time. As a computer scientist from education, this is certainly not something they teach you. They teach you to be logical and to think through things, in a very specific manner. But I was brought up with, AOL was like the first version of the internet, and I remember getting the floppy disk in the store, and go online. It says, the World Wide Web is under construction. So you got to see all these things from scratch. You got to understand all the pains of a file system, of a hard drive of technology, and you spent those earlier years trying to refine your processes to make your own life easier because things were still too complicated. Whereas nowadays, people kind of just walk into it and it's there, right? A lot of that thought was already done. So perhaps that habitual playing and trying to resolve technology's fallacies before it was mature enough may be assisted in sort of how to think and solve and get rid of those problems.
Very interesting. Do your direct reports manage time in the same way that you do?
I think everyone manages time a little bit differently. One way I look at that is I very much strive to have inbox zero as much as I can. It's not realistic. You don't always get there. But I know individuals who have tens of thousands of emails in their inbox, and yet they are phenomenal individuals and do phenomenal work. So I think to each his own in how they get that work done. As long as you are on the same page for what gets done and the end product, how you get there could be different paths.
Very good. What is harder, running operations or raising a baby?
I think both definitely have their challenges, but I think I'm gonna go with having the baby. You can always shut the laptop. You could take the battery out. You can unplug it. You can kill your cell service. But when you're responsible for another human that is in pain or crying, and you're not quite sure what it is to help them out, that's right there. That's present. You got to solve that. You have to take care of it, and nothing else is important at that moment. So I'm gonna go with the baby being the harder of the two.
I was talking the other day to a software engineer that manages also a large team, and she said, I actually got more productive when I had a baby, right? Because now she comes from daycare and I have to be there. Like, I have no option, right? So I have to make my previous hours as productive as I can. Do you feel something similar happened to you when you became a parent?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's directly related to the time I became a parent, but I have heard the same thing from others for a very long time. And I think, as counterintuitive as it sounds, the more you load your plate with, to a certain point, you have to be realistic, the more efficient you are because you're sort of forcing inefficiencies out of the system. So if you assume a person is not terribly busy during the day, then you might have a little extra YouTube time, a little extra surfing time, a little extra, walking around time. But if you know you have X things that need to be accomplished within a certain block of time, you sort of naturally remove the mind from wandering to other activities. That's not to say you shouldn't, relax and you let your mind calm down. But I think it naturally helps get rid of some of the things that would creep into your productivity.
Like Netflix and similar stuff.
Yes, yes. The technology is certainly made in a way to captivate the eyeballs.
Yes. What do you want to be doing in 10 years from now?
Whew, 10 years is a long time from now, isn't it?
It is.
Um, I think predicting the future is super hard. I mean, even looking, 2, 3 years down the road these days is certainly a challenge from a business point of view. But I like what I do. I like creating. I like building. I like seeing things come to fruition. So I think continuing to grow, with the responsibility, with the ownership of strategic missions, getting things accomplished that look arduous and unrealistic, but being able to pull those pieces together at a larger and larger scale, over time as you accelerate.
Nice. What new technology excites you?
New technology. Well, I mean, I guess the proper answer these days would be something AI related. That seems to be the buzzword in everybody's mind. Certainly I think AI is great, and there certainly will be valid uses. I don't necessarily consider it to be the magical pill to solve everything at the current time. And I think it's important for us to keep our eye on what will solve the problems, but also spending a certain time on innovation for the future, but making sure we're not entirely taking our eye off of what still needs to be done today. I do think anything that automates processes is very key, because it really takes away from the productivity of that unique individual. So if you take your staff and they're doing, let's say, each one has a different skill, you hire them for that skill. They're a graphic designer, they're great at that. They're a developer, they're great at that. They're a financial expert, they're great at that. No one hired them to move tasks around in a portal. No one hired them to reply to 10,000 emails. No one hired them to make sure things are checked in a receipt system. So the more we can use technology and AI to remove the mundane processes that are mandatory from a compliance or from a operational point of view, and allow those individuals to focus on what their true passion is, I think that's key. Getting those hours in a day focused on what really drives value, not only for the business, but also to make that person happy, because that person's happiest when they're doing what they love to do. No one's really happy replying to 1,000 emails or a bunch of Slack messages. They're really happy when they get to do what they love from their passion. When they hang out the shingle and say, I am X, that's what really makes them happy. And a technology that allows them to do more of that, I think would be the best case.
Do you think there's more of that in the future of work? Again, this is a very hard question. I wouldn't know how to answer it myself, but how do you think our children will work? Right? I mean, what's next? How is the work going to change going forward?
You're asking me a question that you don't want to answer yourself.
I can answer it. We can exchange answers.
No, it's all good. I think, I even watch my little one, you look at the technology they have, and there's just so many steps above where we started, right? That foundation is just already there. So we had to sort of dig and crawl through decades of maturing products to a point where they are, literally saving us time. They're coming out into the world just already on that automation streak, already on that digital track. And the concept of something not being digital or not being automated is not even something that's imprinted on their brain, which is phenomenal. The concept of going to a store for some is what's a store? What does it mean to go hand cash to somebody? That's a foreign concept to a lot of new children. So I think there'll be a higher interest in their time being spent on activities that they love to do outside of work. I think that would be more of a focus from a life choice point of view. And then from a work point of view, I think hopefully, with the future of work in mind, it will really be spending time doing what they are best at, and having that rest of the operational and process oriented activities sort of pushed away in an automated fashion for them. And we see that. We see task management programs, goal setting, other types of AI assistants and chatbots trying to chip away at those monotonous tasks and make it easier for us. So when our children, 20 years from now become us, so to speak, I think they're just going to be able to focus more on those creative juices and that innovation, and less on what it needs to do to just keep the business running, right? They can spend more time on that actual value part of their careers, at least hopefully.
I agree, and I like the future that you have in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, my children. So the other day, my children were they spent the night with their grandparents, and my father came and he said they spent the night learning Chinese. And I was like, what? Yeah, they picked up the phone, they started using Google Translate, and just learning how to pronounce words in Chinese and just to draw them, right? And they will play, back and that curiosity. It's kind of, sometimes I am afraid that technology can make us lazy, but at the same time, children are showing us that it can spark so much creativity and so much curiosity, right? Curiosity really has a lot of places to go, whereas maybe when both of us were children, there was no way I could learn Chinese with a cell phone. I mean, what could I do, right? I mean, there was no cell phone, no computer, no. I mean, maybe some guys had a PC, but right, they didn't have a translator, and so it's amazing how that creativity and curiosity now has so much tools right there in the cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll be dating myself at the moment, but I remember physically holding a Britannica encyclopedia in my hand. And then I remember migrating from that to an Encarta CD, and they said, this CD contains a world, and the whole world is on one CD. But the speed at which you can do something these days, whether you're looking to translate or learn something, is phenomenal. So your little one says, why do bees, eat these flowers? It's no longer just as a parent making up an answer, which you do, but then it's I made up an answer, but would you like to learn more? And in 2 seconds, you're literally showing them a video about bees, and you're getting excited about insects and what they do. And then the video is allowing them to capture that and memorize it more. And that would never have been possible earlier on. Can you imagine fumbling around, maybe trying a video or going to the store, trying to find a magazine? And it just wouldn't have really been realistic.
Yeah. We live
On
very
that topic, I actually
interesting
remember
times.
we do. I remember a piece of technology earlier on where you're able to buy this little handheld gadget way before cell phones. And if you were driving interstate in the US, you had to know where you were. You had to kind of know the area. And then it would tell you sort of gas stations and food stops that could potentially be along the way. But the data there was frozen in time. So when you purchased it, whatever data they had at the time was there. And I remember sitting there, and this was way before I had technology stuff. And I'm looking at it and saying, well, what happens if the store moves? Like, this doesn't make any sense. But that's the world that we lived in back then. You were just fortunate to have an idea that there could be a restaurant there, or there could be a gas station. And if it wasn't there, you still knew how to read maps. You would figure out where to go next.
So I started working in outsourcing in 2009, and I went to the US, to Tampa, right? And we traveled around. We rented a car. Guys from South America rented a car driving in the US. And for us, driving in the US is tough because you have way more highways and things that we do. So we will learn the map. We will download Google Maps, but print them, and just having them printed and go now. And nowadays it's like, what? You have Google Maps, you have Waze, you have whatever. It not only tells you exactly what to do, but it tells you there's a radar coming up, or a police radar, or whatever, right? It's mind blowing.
I mean, if you think back, remember days of MapQuest. I don't even know if that's still a site. I was helping a relative who was in the service industry, and they had X stops to do per day. And back then it was sort of revolutionary. Say, oh, you have 10 stops. I can map them out for you, and you can go from one stop to the next. But you can't skip a stop, right? You only knew how to get from stop A to stop B. You can't go from A to D and then back to B. So that whole concept nowadays, if you reroute, it's instant. You can do anything. I would question if you take a normal child today and you hand them a map, are we still teaching mapping skills? Do we still teach them how to do this manually? Should for some reason you have to, if you can even find a map to buy?
When I think about critical thinking, right, the one thing that puzzles me, I think it's very hard to be an educator in 2023. It's very hard, right? How do you teach critical thinking when technology is moving so fast that everything that you're teaching can be like solved in a second, right? And sometimes I think, yeah, maybe we should teach them like, hey, find your way, the old way, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is technology, you can use it, but at least understand what that technology is doing for you. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, but it's a very good question.
Similar to we learn how to do mathematics before a calculator. I kind of think reading a map, figuring out your way based on objects and shapes and names is just as critical. I still hope that is taught.
Yeah, I agree. Joe, what do you do when you are not working?
When you're not working, I like to be outside. I think that it's great to enjoy the fresh air and nature. Hikes these days. There's so many towns that are building these wonderful hikes, all different styles and types, and it's really great to just kind of go out there and have a nice fresh walk with your family. See the trees, see the animals going around. I think that's great. And when you're not doing that, you're chasing your little one, and that counts as your exercise for the day.
I agree. One last question, Joe. What would be your advice for someone that is listening and says, hey, I want to be an operations lead. I want to be leading teams and wearing as many hats as Joe is. How do they get there?
They should make sure they want to wear the many hats. They should start with that part of the thinking there. But it's certainly fun, so that's a good thing. I think for them, there are so many resources out there in the world today that are free to access. That is phenomenal, and you should just find something that you think you like. Start with one little piece. Maybe you love people operations. Maybe you love, working on, the sales operations, or you love IT, and just start to understand what that looks like. There's white papers, there's podcasts like this, there's webinars, there's resources galore, and just start to consume that content and see if you can imagine yourself in that world. Could you imagine yourself doing those activities? And then when you are allowed, when you're of age to do work, whether it's an internship or a fellowship or moving to your first, career, think about what type of positions will line you up for that dream job. That dream job may not come the first time around or the second time around, but how can you consider each job to be sort of steps to that eventual path that you really want to get, and trying to align your life in that way, so you can get that experience. And maybe you want to have a little bit in this industry, a little bit in that industry. Maybe you want to focus a little bit on this part of operations and a little bit on that part of operations, and getting that experience level there. I also would say to try to keep that mind open. Part of the benefit and definition of operations is you are sort of the individual that says yes to nearly everything. Your boss or someone comes to you and says, I have this problem, please solve it. It's never really, do you know how to do this? It's assumed that you will learn how to do it, and then come back and have an answer. So learning how to learn is sort of key there, being optimistic, and, to love the creativity of uncovering something you didn't know yesterday, but by dinner time. That's a true sign of being able to take on a myriad range of problems, and be that solution maker for people. You're the one that they come to when they need help and when they want something to be fixed.
I love it. Thank you very much, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get to do this some other time.
Absolutely. A pleasure talking with Mateo. I really appreciate you having me here. Thank you very much.